Welcome to the 12th and final video in this review of basic Greek morphology based on 12 core patterns. We now conclude this series with a review of the main features of the participle paradigms and a very brief introduction to learning principal parts. Participles are formed using the appropriate principal part for the tense form, and the key sign of a participle is a stem formative added to the stem of the verb, and then adjective endings added to that stem formative. When nu tau or omicron tau is used for the stem formative, then the adjective endings will follow a 3-1-3 pattern, as seen in the pattern for pas upon. That was a core pattern we reviewed back in video 6. When men is used, then the endings follow the standard 2-1-2 pattern. These features are summarized in the participle box, and that's a core pattern to be learned, because here you see the nominative singular endings and the stem formative for the main paradigms of the participle. I've not included the future participle since its paradigm is identical to the present participle, just with the sigma tense form sign added. The material in this box and an understanding of the adjective endings provides all you need in order to recognize most participles. So let's see how that works for some of the major paradigms of the participles. Let's start with the present active participles, and the first thing to note is that all the adjective endings are clear and they're regular, and then note the presence of the omicron nu tau in the masculine and neuter forms. The only peculiarity is in the nominative singulars. Since both the masculine and the neuter use the zero form ending, they drop the tau, as we've seen in third declension nouns, and here one lengthens the vowel and the other does not, so that they can be distinguished. The omicron nu tau shows up clearly except in the dative plural, where the sigma causes the nu tau to drop and the omicron to lengthen to omicron upsilon, and we've seen that in some third declension paradigms. That same feature shows up here in the feminine as well. For some reason, a sigma is added to all the feminine stems, and that causes the nu tau to drop and the vowel to lengthen to omicron upsilon. So by learning the participle box, you have the odd nominatives and also the odd stem in the feminine, as well as the stem formative omicron nu tau, which is the key signal in most of the forms. Now in the middle passive, we have the stem formative men, followed by a regular 2-1-2 set of endings. So if you learn that men followed by an adjective ending signals the middle passive participle, then you have what you need to recognize these forms. Since the second aorist uses the same signals as the present, let's look at that next. And you see that the only difference between this paradigm and the one for the present active participle is the aorist stem gamma epsilon nu. And the same goes for the second aorist middle, where the aorist stem is used again, of course, and the sign of the participle and all the endings are the same as the present. Since the aorist is only the middle and not the passive, we'll come to the aorist passive shortly. You see that the participle box includes the main signal for the middle and middle passive participles. Coming to the first aorist, we have another nu tau stem formative for the participle in the 3-1-3 pattern of adjective endings, and now the masculine singular uses the sigma endings instead of a zero form, so there's no need to make any other changes to distinguish it from the neuter singular. And again, the feminine has that added sigma, which causes the nu tau to drop out. So by learning sas, sasa, san, sant in the participle box, you'll have all you need to recognize these forms. The first aorist middle participle presents no difficulties if you know that samen is the signal for this form. Now with the aorist passive, we're back to a nu tau participle paradigm and 3-1-3 endings, and it may look a bit more challenging at first, but as you walk through it, you see that we have exactly the same features as in the other nu tau paradigms. And now the stem formative is thent. Again, the nominative singulars and the feminine stem change are the odd bits, but we've seen the same features in the other paradigms. So again, if you learn thes, thesa, then, thent, you have all these features, so you can recognize aorist passive participles. Some aorists form their passive with the same features except without a theta. That's sometimes called the second aorist passive, but don't confuse these with second aorists, which have a distinctive stem in the third principal part. Aorist passives, of course, are built on the sixth principal part. Coming to the perfect active, we now have the stem formative omicron tau. The endings are 3-1-3, and most of them are clear. And once again, however, we see the nominative singulars in the masculine and the neuter call for attention. In this case, a sigma ending is used in the masculine, so the tau drops and the vowel lengthens. The neuter singular is simply irregular, but it's similar to the third declension pattern type 5a that we reviewed when we did the third declension nouns. Again, the feminine stem has changed, but the endings on it are clear. So as you study the paradigm, you'll see how learning kos, quia, kos, kot will give you the signals you need to sort out the participles in the perfect active. For the perfects, the reduplication also helps to recognize them, and you may recall that some reduplication looks like an augment, so that signal is not always clear. The kappa also helps signal the perfect, though a few verbs follow a second perfect paradigm, which leaves out the kappa. Looking at the perfect middle passive, you'll see that there's no variable vowel, which is a characteristic of the perfect middle passive, so there's no problems with this paradigm if you know the participle box and the 2-1-2 adjective endings. The present participle of me is the same as the endings on the present active participle. So let's now look at a few examples in some passages. So I encourage you to pause the video and sort out the parsing of this form. Here you see men, followed by an adjectival ending, so that's pointing to a middle or middle passive participle. Notice there's no connecting vowel, and it looks like the stem has reduplication, so it looks like we have a perfect. And the eta before the men may point to a contract verb. And indeed, when we go to the lexicon, we find koimao. So this is a genitive plural perfect participle. The form can be either middle or passive, and there's some dispute over which way it's functioning in this particular text. Now try this form. Here we make use of the first aorist active, sas, sasa, san, sant. So sas here is our sign of a feminine active aorist participle, and the on ending tells us it's an accusative singular. The eta is a lengthened stem ending from the contract verb poiao. Here's one more to try. Here you notice the kappa omicron tau, and that tells us it's a perfect active participle, and that's confirmed by the reduplication. The ending is a nominative plural. The stem here is beta eta, which is the stem of the verb bino, so our word is katabino. Recognizing principal parts by becoming familiar with roots is a good way to learn the principal parts. And so to conclude this video, let's look a little bit more at the principal parts. In basic Greek, you learn that verbs in Greek can have 6 principal parts. In English, there are 3 principal parts, and some of them have the same root all the way through the system, some have the same root but modified, and some use more than one root. And the same thing is true in Greek. Pisteuo has the same root all the way through, balo has a modified root all the way through, and horao uses several roots to form its system. A verb's root is found in the aorist, so by paying attention to the root and the present tense form, it's often possible to recognize the forms a verb takes. As you read, you'll gain familiarity with the various forms of verbs as you encounter them, and we've seen that Danker and Newman and Perseus and Bible Hub offer help with difficult forms. If you want to study principal parts, you can find the 8 basic patterns in Using and Enjoying Biblical Greek on pages 68 to 73, and more comprehensive help is available in Funk and Mounts. See especially Funk's list of all the verbs of the New Testament and Apostolic Fathers, arranged by the various patterns as found in the principal parts. As you study a set of principal parts for each verb, ask yourself if you're likely to be able to recognize the tense form and have an idea of what the lemma might look like when you meet that form while reading. For some verbs, you can memorize the lemma and then 1 or 2 stems to give you the key signals for the forms outside the present. For example, for balo, instead of memorizing the whole set of principal parts, you might only need to memorize balo with a couple of stems. So in order to be able to read Greek, you don't need to memorize all the forms of a verb in detail, though for some of the most irregular verbs you will probably need to do so, especially those that use more than one root. And you can see a list of those in Using and Enjoying Biblical Greek on page 73. So here's a summary of what we've seen in this video. The key sign of the participle is that stem formative. Participles with nu tau and omicron tau use adjective endings in a 3-1-3 pattern, while those with men use the 2-1-2 pattern. And that participle box covers the oddities in the participle paradigms, which occur in the nominative singular and feminine forms. Principal parts of some verbs may need to be memorized, but for many verbs, you may only need to learn the lemma and 1 or 2 stems. So this concludes a review of basic Hellenistic Greek morphology based on 12 core patterns. For a copy of the 12 patterns and for parsing practice exercises, see the website for Using and Enjoying Biblical Greek.